we can go right ahead and talk about UConn repeating as NCAA champions. Now, the game as a whole, I was kind of bored, I guess you could say, because so far, watching this UConn team and just how good they are, Purdue in the second half, they couldn't really put up that much of a fight. And it seems like UConn has been doing this to every single team, they go up against in the tournament. So it was just routine for them, because in every single game that they played in this tournament, they've won by double digits. And I think the lowest deficit that they've succumbed to, or the lowest score between those double digits is 13 points. So the lowest margin for error that they had 13-point differential, if anything, when going up against any other team. And it was just a completely dominant performance from the entirety of not the entirety of the game. They started out slow, but for some reason, UConn, they always start out slow, and then they pick it up later going into the second half. I don't know what the coach tells them in the second half, but it's like they flip a completely different switch, and they just play better. And I don't understand why that happens only in the second half, but it does. And honestly, it really just shows the value of coaching in the NCAA tournament. All of these, all of these sort of NCAA, all these NCAA teams, they get their drive and they get most of their inspiration coming from their coach, which is why a lot of athletes, they choose a specific program. It's because of that specific coach. And what they say, it has an impact. And it's you might not think it does, because it's it's just the coach. He's not out there playing the game. But it really does, and you see it every single time UConn enters the second half after having that discussion and that conversation with the coach. It's just it's hard to deny. And I feel like he's going to get a huge check coming in after coming back-to-back. Especially with Kentucky, not having a coach at the moment. And the head coach for UConn, he'll be able to use that opportunity as leverage to sort of try and persuade UConn into giving him more money than what he actually is what UConn intentionally thinks, because everyone knows that UConn's head coach is most likely going to stay with UConn. But if another program offers him more money, then he can just use that to sort of sway UConn into giving him as much, matching the deal, or giving him more in contract negotiations. And that's probably what I see is going to happen. Crucial PG's back in the chat. What's up, Crucial? He says, "Hey, Nelson, I got a buddy who owes a couple of other buddies $50 each because he bet them all that the Pistons would make the playoffs this year. What a silly bet. Anyways, how's your day going?" My day's going great, and it's honestly going a little bit better now that you told me that, because why would he place that much money on the Pistons going all the way to the playoffs? Was this before the season, or was this during the season? Because either or I think was really bad, but was this before or during the season? I'm curious about that. But so that's more so on the UConn side. Now, with Purdue, they are just really unlucky in a lot of these tournaments. And when you look at Purdue, it was sort of the same. If you want a basic summary of this game, think of the women's basketball game and the women's national tournament, where it was South Carolina going up against Iowa. And I cannot believe I'm using a women's basketball game as an example, but that game, a lot more people watched than this game going in, at least in my, I think. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I'm pretty sure that the women's finals game got more views. But regardless, it was the same story, where it was one team had one star player that was able to do everything he or she could do to lift up the team, and then the rest of the team couldn't pick up that slack. Not to mention, Zach Edey was literally sat out for 33 seconds in the span of the Elite Eight and tonight. So it was really he just went in there, took a sip of Gatorade, and then walked back out. like in the previous games. And obviously it's really like not ideal to having one player run your entire offense in college. Like, you can try that even in the NBA. You can try that in the NBA, and that doesn't work. Kobe tried it, didn't work. James Harden tried it, didn't work. James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie tried it again, didn't work. And it really shows that, like, you need a team. And like, there is no I in team, and I know, like, all the Kobe fans and the MJ fans are going to be, there's an I in win and things of that nature, but it's like, it takes more than just one person to win the game. And Crucial PG followed up in the chat. When they were 2-1, he actually met up with them this weekend and denied that he owed them money. Oh, well, look at that. That's definitely something. I mean, placing a bet when your team is 2-1 is really, like, not ideal because, like, again, things like that could literally happen. But on the bright side, they weren't the worst team in the Eastern Conference, so he had that going. But regardless, that's just, like, it was just meh. Like, I mean, that's a really bad bet. And, like, $50 on that? Are you serious? Like, why? Why that team in particular? Place that bet on any other, like, mediocre team. Place that bet on the Knicks. Place that bet on the Orlando Magic. Place that bet on, I mean, at the beginning of the season, I think it would have made sense to place that bet on Toronto, but given how their season panned out, maybe not. But then again, that bet was placed early, so not the smartest move whatsoever. And that's actually really funny that's what happened. But more on this game with Zach Edey and Purdue. This is Purdue right now, after this loss, has the most NCAA tournament wins without winning a title. And obviously, like, that's really not ideal. Critos in the chat, can I ask you something? Sure, you can ask me a question. Like, I'm just going to be talking about this segment. I'll look at your question. If there's more time, I'll give it to you. But, like, if not, I'll do it in the next segment. But, yeah, I answer questions all the time. I feel like I'm pretty responsive to the chat, but I don't know. If I'm just really bad at that, just let me know, and I'll try and get better. But another interesting stat is how UConn finished with the best point differential in the tournament than any other winning team. So they finished with a point differential of plus 140, meaning that when you add up all of their wins, like, and the amount of deficits that they've won by, it adds up to 140, meaning, like, every single game that they played was basically a blowout, and it was no competition. The closest team and the most recent team to getting that was in 2016, where it was Villanova who ended up finishing the tournament with a point differential of plus 124. And, you know, obviously, like, that is elite company. And then the other teams after that are, like, 90s teams. They're like the 96 University of Kentucky and the 99 Duke team. So very, very dominant teams. And the fact that they're 10 points above whoever is second just makes it even more impressive. So do they have a chance of being a dynasty? Because when you look at the rest of UConn and how it played out, they lost a lot of players from their previous team, and yet they were still able to do the same thing that they did last year, if not better than the rest of the competition. And it's like, I mean, at this point, we're sort of trying to figure out, like, is UConn going to be able to be a dynasty? Is UConn going to be, like, just the team that goes back to back? Because what would we constitute as a dynasty? Usually it's three championships in the span of, like, 5 years, I think, in my personal opinion, and possibly, like, you know, like consecutive finals appearances and deep playoff runs. Like, if you have a look at Golden State, like, I don't really think people. Actually, no, yes. People do consider Golden State a dynasty, but they won once, then they lost again, then they went back-to-back, and then they lost again on the three-peat. So they didn't three-peat, but they're still considered a dynasty. And Miami Heat, they didn't three-peat either, and they're also considered a dynasty. with the big three. I mean, would we consider that Miami Heat team a dynasty, or would we consider that just a big three? I'm not entirely sure. And not only that, the New England Patriots in football, when they won one year, then they lost, and then they went back-to-back, that solidified themselves as a dynasty. So it was a combination of deep playoff runs and a combination of constantly winning that determined what was a dynasty. So depending on how far this UConn team goes the next year is going to be dependent on whether or not, depending on where they go far and how far they go. That's going to be dependent on, I don't know, that's not the right word. It's not dependent. That's going to determine, there we go. That's going to determine how we view the UConn team as a whole and how we, because in hindsight, hindsight's always 20/20. So we have to see it in order to, actually call it that. So if they make it to the finals again next year, then I wouldn't really mind calling them a dynasty, because it's they're just that dominant and they're that team to beat, and it seems like they've always been on top, even though there's a chance that they might not win it in the end. But if they do win it, if they do three-peat, on the very, very slim chance that they do, then I think that is definitely dynasty material. And it's very rare to see a dynasty in college sports and college programs, because most of the time it's usually other programs that end up winning it, because this is the same for all sports. Even with football, with Alabama. I'm pretty sure a lot of people consider Alabama, Saban's time in Alabama and certain points of his career as dynasty points in his career. But again, since they're spread out, I'm not entirely sure you would call it a dynasty, just a dominant team. But that's just me. So, Carrito, I do have time to answer this question from Carrito. He says, should I play point guard or keep playing shooting guard? Because, yes, I can shoot, but my strong point is basketball IQ, being a field general. And, Harden was a shooting guard, and he seemed to do both just fine. So it really just depends. Especially now, where it's in this era of basketball, there's really no positions. It's you guard the player that best fits your matchup, and whoever best fits the matchup from the other team guards you. And there's not really much positions going on in the game. You're either a playmaker, or you're either a spot-up, or you're either the center that sets screens or can do all of that. So I don't really think it's much of a difference. It's a guard. You're literally a guard, and whether you bring the ball up or not, or whether you make decisions or not, it's it doesn't. We live in an era where it's if you're a point guard, it's not guaranteed that you're always going to bring the ball up as a point guard. If you're a shooting guard, it's not guaranteed that you're always going to be the one spotting up as a shooting guard, as we've seen James Harden bring the ball up several times when he was on Houston, and he had Chris Paul, who was a very good playmaker back then, and still is a very good playmaker now. But I don't think it really matters that much. That's my personal opinion, though, because if you can do everything, if you can provide value to the team with what you're doing, then just do it. It doesn't really matter what position you play, because you're just going to provide that same production anyway. But that's my personal opinion. But with that, we are out of time for this first segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the second segment, and I will talk about NBA power rankings, as well as another comment that Carrito has in the chat that I just read, but I have no time for that. So I will be right back after this short break.